The Hoop Scoop begins with one of the biggest mouthpieces in the NBA, Draymond Green. And leave it to Draymond to fire up the news cycle with a social media rant. And it actually reminded me of my first journalism teacher way back in high school. There was an event, an annual event that one of the student reporters went to cover, and he came back with no story. And she asked what happened. And he said, well, they canceled the event. And her point was, that is the story. An event is no longer occurring. And that's what Draymond got us thinking about, where we usually see huge fireworks around free agency, and the fact that it's calm, well, that is the story. The old adage of no news is still news. And that is really what's interesting. But I don't know if I agree entirely with what Draymond Green wrote on X. He said things about how it used to be this big event, July 1st would hit, and all this craziness and this, remember the Hamptons 5? You know, he said, look, he said, players aren't getting as much money. The current collective bargaining agreement is poor. He thinks he should be the players union president, given he's a veteran and as he's very close with Bob Myers, the former GM of the Warriors. So he understands this stuff. Draymond has his own podcast. He's been outspoken with these types of things. And of course, the underlying storyline with all this is his teammate, Jonathan Kuminga, has a potential extension or could get moved. So that's a big factor in all this. But Draymond offering his 2 cents, totally acceptable. But I just don't know if I agree with it. And that's sort of the interesting part, is because free agency, in my eyes, is not broken. It's different, particularly this summer. The new collective bargaining agreement, they put in new things like the first apron and second apron. We've all heard so much about this offseason. Well, teams need time to adjust and massage their books and make certain deals where they can take advantage of it. The reason we still see a lot of middle class or middle tier players moving from team to team. We've seen plenty of that. But teams are now incentivized to re-sign their own superstars. And very important, players and teams can start negotiating, or at least talking, right after the NBA Finals. They don't have to wait till midnight on July 1st. So there's some momentum that other teams that are pursuing don't get. Also, players are just taking more of the guaranteed money. So yes, the new collective bargaining agreement incentivizes players to stay, but they're still getting boatloads of money. Remember the Supermax, and that's really good. But the aprons are the key. But Bobby Marks, the front office executive or analyst at ESPN, former front office executive in the league, said $5.3 billion in salaries this summer. That's on par with what there was last summer. There's almost 50 signings this year in free agents. So that's all kind of business as usual. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Is the new CBA hurting free agency? What are your thoughts to Draymond's rant on X? I think the other key thing here is only the Brooklyn Nets had a lot of money to spend. It's just the cyclical component to this. Next summer, a lot more teams are expected to open up their pocketbooks, which is why LeBron opted in for one more year, things along those lines. But this apron stuff is really, really a factor, because the regular salary cap is a soft cap like it's always been. But the first and second aprons are serving essentially as a hard cap because the penalties are so extreme. It's not just money that teams are penalized for going into the extra sort of luxury tax. You get lose draft picks, all this stuff. So really, it's a hard cap. Now, what I don't like is that teams like the Celtics, who've drafted well and traded well and things like that, are punished with when these salaries are up. So I think there should be an addendum to this, but it's not that players aren't getting money. It's that teams aren't allowed to keep their players and pay them what they want to. So it's the teams that are actually hurt. So there's more parity. And we've seen, 7 straight years without a repeat champion, which is atypical for the NBA. So it's not that the players are suffering. It's actually the fan bases and teams have to give up players that they deserve to keep because they've drafted well or made shrewd trades. That's really the issue. But the salary cap is capped, and then the TV deal money is not as high. So there will be less money than they anticipated a couple of years ago, but it's not really what Draymond's breaking down. He just wanted more movement and things like that, but that's not the issue. Players are staying put because they're taking big money. And then, yes, players are being traded that normally they wouldn't be traded, like Drew Holiday, Porzingis, some others, because Boston had to get below the apron. But that's hurting the teams, not the players. Porzingis is still getting his money. Drew Holiday's still getting his money. Dame's still getting his money, even though he was bought out when under normal circumstances without the aprons he wouldn't have. So I don't know. He's sort of right, but the exponential growth is limited in a lot of ways. So let's check out time for a heat check in the wake of Draymond Green's rant on social media, and we have some good ones. Slightly biased. 10 years ago today, this happened. One of the funniest and sadly most embarrassing nights in NBA history. And he said he did a ramble video going over the full timeline. This is when DeAndre Jordan was cornered off in Dallas, and Chandler Parsons and others were trying to recruit him to the Mavs as a free agent, blocking out the Clippers. It was a mess of an evening, but it was a lot of jokes. The Golden State Warriors, the famous meme that we all love on X, it's been 84 years. And then the Warriors cap photoshopped on her because they have not made a single move in free agency. Crazy. And then this was on June 30th. Remember when Shams said we were going to see a crazy free agency? Well, Sopranos World Twitter account, Shams' line about how crazy NBA free agency would be with Paulie. You're weak, you're out of control, and you become an embarrassment to yourself and everybody else. Yeah, we love this. It's salacious when all this player movement. It's a lot of fun, and especially when we hear the backstories from excellent reporters who uncover the timeline and the connecting of the dots of exactly what happened. But ultimately, the players are in control, and they're still getting a lot of money. I will say this, and I've said this for years. The main issue I have is that it's not a free market. There is a max contract for a player, and that is one of the dumbest things that exists. We don't have that in the NFL. There's team salary caps in both the NBA and the NFL, which I'm fine with. NBA has soft caps, but some of those exceptions are for teams incentivized to keep their own players. I'm okay with that. But it's not a free market. It should be a free market. And why should there be any sort of ceiling on what a player can make unless, as long as it's below the team salary cap max? That's why we have super teams. So you wouldn't have what LeBron did in 2010 by taking like $1 million less so you could go play with elite players instead of just squeezing every last drop. He saw the point of diminishing returns. So rather than make 25 million, he said, I'll take 23.5, but I get to play with these guys. And guys like Eric Bledsoe were making that much. So if you have, like, let's say it's a $100 million team salary cap, the best players, Jokic, Giannis, Luka, those guys would all make like 70. And then the bottom end players would make like 1 or 2 million. And the middle tier guys would make like 7. So you could have distribution of the best talent everywhere because nobody would take less money of like $50 million. That's the key. Giannis wouldn't take 10 to go play with Durant or something. You would have guys making 70 that are the elite players, and then the next tier guys making like 55. And so taking less money would never be a thing. So you'd have the 30 best players evenly distributed over 30 teams. It's what we all experience with rotisserie and auction leagues. So the fact that there's a player max, because there aren't 30 elite tier 1 players. There are like 5, 7 or so. And then after that, why would 30 guys get max deals when there's only 5 or 7 that are comparable? And that's the problem. So the fact that it's not a free market, and that's why this all started in 2010, LeBron said, forget it. And you can make more money on the back end if you form a championship team, then you have more visibility. And then obviously there's no state tax in Florida. So it made more sense for LeBron in 2010 to go to the Miami Heat and play with guys like Bosh and Wade rather than getting stuck playing with like Mo Williams and other players he was stuck with in Cleveland. It just didn't make sense. So the max deal is what really ruined the parity in the league. But then the super max and then now these aprons are making it more like parity. So that's my 2 cents on that. And that's really, if you're going to address an issue, that's what should be addressed. Fans in the stands is when we check on you, our audience, our crowd, and we want to hear from you in the comments section on the YouTube channel. So please let us know what you like, what you dislike, things you want to see more of, less of. Anything goes. One question the other day was a guy asking me about my favorite NFL futures. Anything goes. Let's check out some good ones we saw in the recent episodes. Paul chiming in, Kevin Durant's responses on social media are ridiculous. Someone needs, and I'm sure that they have mentioned it, to chill. Don't feed the trolls. Be the pro that you are. And that was my discussion of Durant just getting into it with randoms on X and going back and forth and saying some things that really are just so unclassy. But I do see the potential positive. It's nice to have someone authentic instead of just towing the company line and being so polished and basically, a blank wall. But it's nice that he's removed the filter and has the access. But there are some things that are beneath him. And I agree with what Paul was saying. There's a certain line you just shouldn't cross. I think he has 21 million followers on X, so need to be careful there. But it's a new age. Maybe I'm an old guy yelling at the cloud. Who knows? But yeah, I would say my mom would definitely have something to say if I did anything like that on X. The most recent episode with Giannis free agency about whether, getting Miles Turner is going to mean Giannis is going to be getting a trade soon. Original updates. No, I don't understand why people don't think they have a good team for the East or can't win the East and come out of the East. They have Kevin Porter Jr., who for 4 years on the Rockets was putting up good numbers and continuously growing. Now he has the chance to be the starting point guard. I expect 20 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, and then you have Giannis and Miles Turner to be your big man. And then you have Bobby Portis there to pick up some defensive slack. You have Gary Trent, who's also point guard, and then you just rotate in some shooting guards for defense that can also play well, like they're stacked to compete in the East. Respectfully, I disagree. Look, Giannis is fantastic, and the Miles Turner addition does make them a little better. Remember, they lost Damian Lillard. But I just don't think there's enough help around Giannis. The defense has issues. I don't love Doc. The odds market has him as the 5th favorite in the Eastern Conference behind the Cavs, the Knicks, the Orlando Magic. The Celtics aren't above them, but there's other teams, the Sixers, and then Milwaukee. But I even like Detroit above them. And so I'm just not buying. They need help dribbling the ball. I mean, I don't think Gary Trent's a point guard. They're going to have Porter run point. I mean, he's put up good stats, bad teams, but we don't know if he can put up serious numbers with the Bucks as a starting guard. He's maybe running the point with next to Trent, and then I don't think much Kuzma at all. Turner was at best the 3rd or 4th best player of the Pacers. Now he has to be the 2nd best next to Giannis. It's a recipe it's not a recipe for success, but Giannis is amazing. I just think eventually he's going to request a trade. If it doesn't happen this summer, I think it happens during the season. At best for Milwaukee, they'll get one full season because they're not going to compete. They may get out of the first round, but ultimately he's going to request a trade next summer. That's my 2 cents. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Hard Pass. Appreciate everyone checking in. Don't forget to like and subscribe and also comment. Join the conversations, we like to say, because we want to hear your thoughts.